You can save a ton of money buying the LG B4 over the LG C4, but is it going to be worth saving that money to get the B4 over the C4? Or are you going to be missing out on a lot of things with the LG B4 that you would have had with the LG C4? That is a really good question, and we're going to answer that question and much more in this full review of the LG B4, so stay tuned. We're going to look at the B4 in terms of how it does compared to the C4 in a lot of cases in this video, but it is not a direct comparison with the C4. I'll have that comparison separately, but it is important to talk about it within context of the C4 because I think a lot of people are going to be choosing between the B4 because in some cases you may find yourself saving a lot of money, and in some areas it's just as good as the C4. But before you buy the B4, no pun intended, you are going to want to know about these specification differences for the C4 and the B4. And I have them up on the screen right here. As you can see, one of the biggest differences is going to be 144 Hz refresh rate capability on the LG C4. Well, the B4 doesn't have that. It has 120 Hz capability, but it does have 4 HDMI 2.1 ports. So you do have that going for you this time around with the B series, where in the past that wasn't the case. So if you're not doing PC gaming, this really won't matter to you. You can see there's a bit of a difference in audio as well, and it is something that I did hear for myself when I had them side by side. I thought that the C series does have better audio than the B series, but you're probably going to want to get a soundbar or a dedicated sound system with both of these TVs. As far as the navigation and the actual features go, this is pretty much going to be the same TV as the LG C series in regards to that. You do have most of the things in place that you do have on the LG C series, and the always on functionality is there as well. So if you like that sort of thing, you do have that with the LG B series. The TV still uses WebOS just like the C series, and it also used that same old controller just like the C series. Available with the LG C4 is the AI picture wizard. With the B4, you have that here as well. So that's a really good thing that you're getting most of the features that the C4 is getting. The TV itself has different stand than the LG C series. It's actually positioned on 2 side feet rather than being on a pedestal like the C series. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're talking about the designs of the TVs. Now, when it comes down to the HDR on this TV, the HDR presentation is actually really well done on the TV overall. In game mode, you do have HGIG, so that is going to work really well with the LG B4, and you have the ability to use professional tone mapping if you want to, like on the LG C4. And this gives you more control over the roll-offs for the actual tone mapping of the TV at different content levels. So that's a really cool feature to have in a TV, so you're not losing out on that feature from the LG C4 either. So when it comes down to brightness, it's not going to wow you anywhere close to where the C series can at times. I think the C series is absolutely the brighter TV, but in most content, they did end up looking fairly similar. So it's just when you have to really stress the content, it can look brighter on the LG C series, although it still doesn't hold the color very well. Where I think the B series actually does show color a little bit better than the C series. And I'm not quite sure why that is, and it might end up being because the actual processing inside of it is just a little bit better actually than the processor in the C series. I think it's got an updated algorithm that is more closer to what the G series is than the C series because they are using a new processing algorithm, and I think they do borrow a few things from that processor. For example, the gradients seem to handle a little bit better on the LG B series, which means you're going to get smoother gradients like in the skies of movies like The Martian, for example. I also noticed that the low bitrate streaming seemed to be a little bit cleaner on the LG B series as well. So I do think that the processing in some ways is better than the LG C series. And I actually didn't mind the color on the B series. It looks pretty good for the most part. Taking a look at some Dolby Vision movies on the LG B series, I thought that it fared pretty good overall. It looked pretty similar to the HDR quality that I saw from the HDR10 versions of the same movies, and I really did like the Dolby Vision performance. I thought it was a good Dolby Vision overall. I didn't notice anything that was wrong or something that didn't work as intended with the Dolby Vision on the B series. So that is a good thing. You often don't know how the Dolby Vision is going to perform in some of these TVs, which is why I always recommend watching an HDR10 for most TVs. But this one seems to be pretty safe to watch Dolby Vision on for the LG B series. Now, I just want to be clear that I did go out and buy the B4 for review. And if you guys want to help support the channel to help us get more TVs in for future reviews, one of the best ways you could do so is by clicking one of the affiliate links before you're ready to buy your TV. Thank you so much for your guys' support. Now, let's continue on. In regards to standard dynamic range content, SDR, movie watching, TV shows, it's actually very similar to the LG C4. When I was looking at these two side by side, I swear they looked almost the same most of the time. I do think that the LG B4 actually did a little bit better job in regards to making the content look a little bit better. And I think that's kind of weird because the LG B series in the past has been the one that has the lesser processor. But in this case, I feel like the Alpha 8 may have some benefits over the Alpha 9 processor. That is something that I do notice, and like I mentioned earlier, the gradients seem to be a little bit better as I'm not seeing as much color banding within the LG B4 as I do with the LG C4. That extends also to game mode. All right, now let's talk about the game mode for the LG B4. How is it overall? Well, when you are in something like a movie mode and you go to game mode, for example, you're not losing really any color, which is great. That means that this is not going to be affected by the same thing that happens on the LG C series where you're losing that color overall, the color brightness. Now, that said, the C4's game mode compared to the LG B4's game mode is pretty similar. To be honest with you, looking at these two TVs side by side, there weren't a lot of times where I thought that the LG C4 was better than the B4 or the B4 was better than the C4. Most of the time, they just looked about the same. And I thought that overall the game mode was better on the B4 at times because it handled the gradients in the sky a little bit smoother. That was nice to see. For standard dynamic range in game mode, SDR gaming is going to be pretty much the same. You still have the peak brightness option disabled, so you're not able to toggle that. So you still have the same issues as the LG C4 does have in that mode as well. And like I mentioned, you still have most of the capability of the LG C4 in game mode. You just do not have the capability to do the 144 hertz refresh rate. So if you need that and you're a PC gamer, then you have to go with the LG C4 instead of the B4. One area where the B4 is better than the C4 is going to be within image retention for the game mode. In game mode, you will see image retention pop up way more on the C4, where if you just have a static image hanging on the screen for a second, like a pause screen, and there's a white text or a white box on the pause screen, as soon as you unpause, you will notice that box will hang around on the screen for the C4 for a little bit longer. And on the B4, it'll be there as well, but it fades away quite quickly. But on the C4, it does hang around much longer, and it is more distracting on the C4 because it hangs around longer. So that is something that I definitely would say keep that in mind if you are a gamer. Now, I really want to talk about the biggest thing with the LG B4 right now, and that's the proposition of value. You are going to get a better deal on this than you will with the LG C4 most of the time. And that's the really important thing you have to remember here is that most of the time. In cases where you will see the LG C4 be on sale and the LG B4 isn't on sale, then it's going to skew those values a little bit differently. Now, you want to pay attention to these things because sale prices do change often, and it's not always going to be the case where the B4 is significantly cheaper than the C4. But currently, you have a 77-inch OLED TV model for $2,000, and I think that is a really good deal for a 77-inch OLED TV, no matter how you slice it. And they also do have the 48-inch version of this TV for $749. That is a really good deal for a 48-inch OLED TV. So the B series is one that I don't think a lot of people should overlook, especially if it's right within your budget range. This is going to be one that you should feel pretty confident in buying as long as you're not close to buying the next tier up. If it's really close in price, I do think that next tier up, well, you're talking about a better TV overall with those TVs in mind. So when I take all those things into consideration, the LG B4 in a lot of cases is a good value overall, but you do have to pay attention to that price. That is the most important thing. And I'll have some updates on prices, and I'll be doing some sale videos as the year goes on. So stay tuned to the channel so you don't miss those price updates. All right, so what about the downsides to the B4? Well, they're not much different than the downsides to most OLED TVs. At higher brightness levels, you can see full screen brightness will get dimmed down when you're dealing with a very bright scene that hits all of a sudden. That's ABL. And when it comes down to static images being on the screen, you'll notice that the screen does dim down over time. That's going to be the ASBL within the TV. So those things are present, but there is also going to be some tinting off angle that you'll want to be aware of. If you're sitting off angle, this could be a problem, but I also noticed this on the LG C4 as well, so it's not specific to only the B4, so just keep that in mind. Screen uniformity also seems to be very hit or miss on most of these WOLED TVs. Most WOLED TVs that I've ever checked out have some sort of uniformity issue in regards to vertical banding. That does seem to be an issue that plagues OLED TVs. Sometimes it's worse than others, and that's going to be a panel lottery issue, so do be aware of that. But other than those cons and the fact that it just doesn't get as bright as the C4 or the S90D, for example, it's a really good TV overall. I don't really have too many complaints about the B4 in regards to what it can deliver picture quality wise. It is a really, really good TV. I think most people would agree that it's an amazing TV. When you sit down and watch it, you will have a very pleasant experience. In my opinion, the only reason you would want to buy an LG C4 over the B4 is if you want better HDR performance outside of game mode and you want 144 Hz capability inside of game mode. In some cases, I actually feel like the B4 is the better buy than the C4. And you might think that sounds crazy, but if you look at these TVs and see how similar they are, you would probably come to that same conclusion. I really don't see an area where I would buy the C4. And if I had the money to afford a C4, I wouldn't go with the C4. I would go with the S90D or the Bravia 8, as I think that they do better in a lot of different areas over the C4. So the C4 does kind of find itself in a tough spot. But I like where the B4 sits, and especially if it can get discounted even further, it could be a really good value for you at the end of the day. Let me know what you guys think of the LG B4 in the comments below. And if you want to watch another video on the LG B4, I'll have my comparison with the C4 available right here. And if that's not up yet, you can watch the LG C4 against the S90D. I think you're going to want to watch that video if you're interested in the B4. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.